A solitary figure crouched beside a stream, his calloused fingers testing the thinning water. Kohana Black Sky had learned long ago that some wounds never heal, like the drought scorching the Arizona territory or the emptiness left by his family's massacre. The settlers' proposition was simple: take their virgin girl as payment for peace, a human bargain, wrapped in the pretense of marriage. Clara Finch stood trembling at the meeting grounds, her pale skin flushed with shame beneath the merciless sun. She'd been taught that sacrifice was noble, that submission was godly. Yet, when Kohana's dark eyes met hers, neither saw what they expected, not predator and prey, but two souls caught in others' schemes. What happens when the man meant to claim you offers freedom instead? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The Finch family Bible lay open on Clara's lap, its weathered pages speaking of sacrifice and obedience. Her trembling fingers traced the faded inscription where her mother's name was written before her own. In the dim light of dawn, Clara had sought comfort in its familiar weight. Now it offered none. The Lord asked Abraham to sacrifice his son. Her father had reminded her last night, his voice firm but unable to meet her eyes. We must all make sacrifices for the greater good. Clara closed the Bible, clutching it to her chest. The greater good. That's what the settlement council had called it when they'd struck their bargain with the Apache. After 3 seasons of drought, with livestock dying and children growing gaunt, desperation had driven them to negotiate with the savages who somehow thrived while settlers withered. Through her window, Clara watched her father speak with Reverend Holcomb. Both men kept glancing toward her cabin, their faces grim. They'd told her only yesterday of her role in securing peace. A bride offering, a human token of goodwill to the widowed Apache scout who served as intermediary between the two peoples. "It's an honor," her mother had whispered, packing Clara's meager belongings with shaking hands. "You'll bring water rights to our people." Clara had nodded numbly, unable to voice the scream building inside her. 19 years of proper behavior, of demure smiles and dutiful worship, had culminated in this, being traded like cattle to a man whose language she didn't speak, whose customs terrified her. She placed the Bible in her small traveling bundle. Whatever awaited her among the Apache, she would need its strength. The wooden floor creaked beneath her as she moved about the cabin, touching familiar objects one last time: the hand-carved shelf her father had built, the quilt her mother had stitched during the long journey west. "Clara," her younger sister Sarah whispered from the doorway, eyes red, rimmed from crying all night. "You don't have to go." "Yes, I do." Clara's voice sounded strange to her own ears, hollow yet determined. "Without this treaty, we'll lose everything." "But to marry an Indian." "A widower," Clara corrected automatically, repeating what little she'd been told about the man called Kohana. "A scout who speaks English." As if that made it better. As if language could bridge the chasm between their worlds. The settlement bell rang once, twice, 3 times. The signal. Clara picked up her bundle, squaring her shoulders as she'd been taught a proper young woman should. No theatrics. No displays of emotion. The entire settlement had gathered to see her off, their faces a blend of pity, relief, and that peculiar righteousness that came from watching someone else's sacrifice. "Remember your upbringing," Reverend Holcomb intoned, pressing a silver cross into her palm. "You go as a light into darkness." Clara nodded, unable to speak. The Reverend didn't understand that she felt like the darkness, the unknown, the frightening, was swallowing her whole. As the wagon carried her toward the meeting place, Clara caught a final glimpse of the settlement, the church steeple, the struggling gardens, the faces of children who would drink from streams secured by her marriage. She clutched her mother's Bible tighter. This was what virtue demanded. This was God's will, the elders said. Clara stared at the dust rising behind the wagon, trying to believe it. But all she could think was that the God she'd been raised to worship had never asked women what they were willing to sacrifice. Men like Abraham were consulted directly. Women like her were simply told what was required. The wagon crested a hill, and Clara saw them, a small group of Apache waiting at the designated meeting place. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she spotted a tall figure standing slightly apart from the others. Kohana Black Sky, the man who would claim her before sundown. Kohana turned the small wooden horse over in his calloused hands. 3 summers had passed since his son had placed it there, tiny fingers pressing it into his palm before the fever took him. After Kaya and little Noshi died, Kohana had stopped carving such toys. What was the point of creating things that would outlive those they were made for? "The white chiefs come today," Elder Muck said, approaching Kohana's fire, "with their offering." Kohana slipped the wooden horse into the leather pouch at his waist. "I never agreed to this. You speak their tongue. You understand their ways." Muck seated himself across from Kohana, his weathered face solemn in the early light. "The council has decided. This will secure our water rights. By trading a woman like a horse?" Kohana's voice remained level, though anger simmered beneath. "This is not our way." "Survival has become our way," Muck replied. "The drought does not care for traditions." Kohana stared into the dying embers of his fire. He had earned his place among the tribal council through years of scouting, of navigating the dangerous borders between Apache land and white settlements. His ability to speak the settlers' language made him valuable, but it also meant he saw clearly the contempt in which they held his people. "And if I refuse, then another will take her." Muck's expression hardened. Someone who might not be gentle. The implication hung in the air between them. Several younger warriors had volunteered eagerly when the settlers first proposed the arrangement. To them, a white woman was a trophy, not a person. "They call this marriage," Kohana said bitterly, "but they offer her like meat to wolves." "Then be not a wolf," Muck replied simply, rising to his feet. "The council awaits your answer before midday." Alone again, Kohana walked to the edge of the camp where horses grazed on the sparse vegetation. His mare nickered softly as he approached, pushing her velvet nose against his chest. At least horses were honest creatures. They did not disguise possession as partnership. His thoughts drifted to Nayeli, his wife of 7 summers. Their union had been one of choice, her choice as much as his. Among their people, women had voice and standing. This settler arrangement felt wrong, tainted by the white man's belief that women were property to be traded. Kohana's hand found the wooden horse again. Noshi had been 5 when the sickness came. Old enough to laugh at his father's stories, young enough to believe that his father could protect him from anything. Kohana had failed at that most basic duty. How could he now take responsibility for another vulnerable life? Yet the alternative troubled him more. The drought had pushed tensions to breaking point. Without this treaty, blood would flow instead of water. And if he refused the girl, her fate among his people might be harsh. An idea formed slowly, taking root like a desert plant after rare rain. There was another way, an old custom seldom invoked, the 12-night moon vigil. Traditionally, it allowed couples to determine compatibility before finalizing a union. It would give the girl choice while satisfying the letter of the agreement. The council would oppose it, the settlers would misunderstand it, but it would be true to Apache ways while rejecting the settlers' attempt to trade a human life. Kohana mounted his horse, decision made. He would meet this Clara Finch. He would offer her not possession but possibility, not captivity but choice. As he rode toward the meeting place, the wooden horse bumped gently against his side, a reminder of all he had lost and why some traditions were worth preserving. In a world where drought parched the land and greed parched men's souls, perhaps honor could still find root. The ceremonial blanket lay folded across Mac's arms, its geometric patterns telling stories of mountains and rivers that Clara couldn't read. The old Apache man's expression remained impassive as the settlement delegation approached the meeting ground, a flat expanse of red earth where 2 worlds uncomfortably converged. Clara kept her eyes downcast, aware of the weight of gazes from both sides. The settler men, including her father, stood stiffly in their Sunday clothes, clutching rifles despite this being a peace meeting. The Apache group was smaller. 3 elders, 2 warriors, and him, Kohana Black Sky. She'd glimpsed him from the wagon, and now she dared not look directly at the man who would become her husband before sundown. "We bring what was promised," Reverend Holcomb announced, placing a hand on Clara's shoulder to urge her forward. "Clara Finch, a virtuous and obedient young woman of our settlement." The words stung worse than the midday heat. Not Clara Finch, beloved daughter, or Clara Finch, skilled with herbs and needlework, just an object being presented, her only value in her virtue and compliance. Mach stepped forward, speaking in Apache. Kohana translated, his English clear but accented. "The council accepts this gesture of peace," he said, dark eyes briefly meeting Clara's before addressing the settlers. "I am Kohana Black Sky, who will receive this offering." Clara flinched at the word offering, though whether from shame or anger, she couldn't tell. She hadn't expected him to be so direct about what this was. The ceremonial blanket was presented to her. She was to wrap herself in it, as symbol of entering the Apache band. Clara accepted it with trembling hands, its weight surprisingly comforting against the chill that had settled in her bones, despite the heat. "The terms are clear," her father said, producing the treaty document. "Water access for our settlement in exchange for this union and assurances of peace between our peoples." As the men discussed boundaries and access points, Clara stood wrapped in the alien blanket, feeling increasingly invisible despite being the center of this transaction. She studied Kohana from beneath lowered lashes, tall, broad-shouldered, with lines of grief etched around his eyes. Not young, but not old, perhaps 30 summers. His hair hung in 2 braids, adorned with small silver ornaments that caught the light when he moved. "It is agreed," Reverend Holcomb finally announced. "The marriage will be recognized by both peoples. May this union bring prosperity to all." A murmur passed through both groups. Clara felt her heart pounding in her throat. This was it, the moment she'd dreaded since yesterday's announcement. Then Kohana spoke, his voice steady. "Among my people, there is a tradition called the 12-night moon vigil," he said. "Before unions are sealed, the couple observes 12 nights of learning. I invoke this rite." Confusion rippled through both groups. The Apache elders exchanged glances while the settlers frowned. "What does this mean?" Clara's father demanded. "It means," Kohana replied, looking directly at Clara for the first time, "that for 12 nights she will stay in our camp, but not as my wife. She will learn our ways, and I will learn hers. On the 13th day, she may choose." "Choose?" Reverend Holcomb's face reddened. "The agreement was for marriage, not whatever this is." "The agreement was for peace," Kohana countered. "This changes nothing about water rights or boundaries. It simply honors our traditions." Clara's mind reeled. Choice? Was he offering her a choice? The groups erupted in argument. Clara stood silently in the ceremonial blanket, watching Kohana. His face revealed nothing, but when their eyes met again, she saw something unexpected. Respect. Not desire or ownership, but acknowledgement of her humanity. That night, in a small dwelling at the edge of the Apache camp, Clara sat alone on a bed of furs, still wrapped in the ceremonial blanket. Outside, she could hear the murmurs of the tribe, occasionally glimpsing shadows moving past her door. No one had explained what would happen next. She only knew that she had 12 nights before she must decide, though what choice she truly had remained unclear. Dawn broke harsh and bright over the Apache camp. Clara had barely slept, startling at every unfamiliar sound. Coyotes in the distance, the creak of hide dwellings in the night wind, the soft footfalls of sentries. When the hide flap of her dwelling lifted, she sat up quickly, clutching the blanket around her shoulders. Kohana stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the morning light. In one hand, he held a rolled piece of hide. "The first day begins," he said simply. "Come." Clara hesitated, then rose and followed him outside. The camp was already bustling with activity. Women grinding corn, children carrying water, men preparing for hunting. Many paused to stare at her, some with curiosity, others with suspicion. "They wonder why you are here," Kohana said, leading her toward the edge of the camp. "Why I invoked the vigil." "I wonder the same," Clara replied, finding her voice for the first time since arriving. "What is this vigil truly for?" Kohana stopped at a flat rock overlooking the valley and unrolled the hide. Clara realized it was a crude map of the surrounding territory, with lines indicating trails and small symbols marking features she couldn't identify. The 12, Night Moon Vigil, he explained, is meant for learning. Before a union, the couple must understand each other's ways. His finger traced a path on the map. Today, you learn the land. Why? Clara asked. Why offer this instead of what was agreed? Kohana's dark eyes studied her face. Because my people do not take wives as property. That is the white man's way. The blunt statement made Clara flush with a mixture of embarrassment and strange relief. At least he acknowledged what this arrangement truly was. This, Kohana continued, pointing to the map, is the Mesa Trail. It connects water sources. He indicated several blue marks. Knowing these paths could save your life. Clara studied the map, trying to make sense of the unfamiliar symbols. I don't understand these markings. You will, he replied, by walking them. What followed was a grueling morning as Kohana led her along rocky trails that wound through the scrubland. The sun beat down mercilessly, and Clara stumbled often in her impractical settler's boots. Kohana neither slowed his pace nor offered help, but would wait silently when she fell too far behind. The settlers' camp, he said, pointing to the distant cluster of buildings, takes water from this stream. His finger traced the blue line to a larger river. The stream feeds our main water source. Your people want both. Clara wiped sweat from her brow. The drought has been hard on everyone. Some more than others, Kohana replied. Your people have other sources, mine do not. As they continued, Clara gradually began recognizing landmarks, a lightning-struck tree, an unusual rock formation, the curve of a dry creek bed. The map in her mind slowly took shape, connecting to the one Kohana had shown her. Near midday, they reached a small spring hidden among rocks. Kohana knelt, showing her how to use a hollow reed to draw clean water from beneath the surface. Most settlers pass this by, he said. They see only dry rocks. Clara drank gratefully, the cool water reviving her. Why show me these things? Knowledge is survival, he answered. Then after a pause, and choices require knowledge. As they made their way back to camp, Clara made her first independent decision. Instead of following directly behind Kohana as she had all morning, she chose a parallel path, putting her new knowledge to use. When they reached a fork in the trail, she took the correct turn without prompting. Kohana's expression didn't change, but he nodded once. Acknowledgement, perhaps even approval. Back at camp, whispers followed them. Clara caught fragments of conversation from both Apache observers and the settler representatives who had remained to ensure the treaty's implementation. Neither group seemed pleased by whatever they were witnessing between Kohana and the White Offering. On the second day, Kohana appeared with a folded parchment, the treaty document itself. Clara recognized it immediately. She had watched her father and Reverend Holcomb hunched over it for hours in the days before her departure. You can read, Kohana asked, holding it out to her. Clara nodded, taking the document carefully. My mother taught me before she passed. Good. Today we follow the water. They walked to the largest spring in Apache territory, a place where water bubbled up from underground, creating a small oasis of green amid the parched landscape. Several Apache women were already there, collecting water in clay vessels, their eyes following Clara with undisguised curiosity. Water is life, Kohana said, kneeling beside the spring. For my people, it is also sacred. He dipped his fingers into the clear pool, then touched them to his forehead in a gesture Clara recognized as reverence. It reminded her of Reverend Holcomb's benedictions, though simpler and more direct. This is what your people want, he continued. Not just water to drink, but water to control. Clara unfolded the treaty, scanning its formal language. It says access rights are to be shared equally, she noted, finding the relevant paragraph. Kohana's expression remained neutral. Read the words carefully. Clara frowned, examining the document more closely. The treaty granted settlers access to the main water sources, including this spring, while restricting Apache usage to certain days and amounts. It wasn't equal at all. Moreover, a clause near the end caught her attention, something about security measures to ensure compliance. What does this mean? She asked, pointing to the clause. The settlement retains rights to implement security measures as deemed necessary to protect agreed water access. It means guns, Kohana said simply, pointed at my people when they come to drink. Clara shook her head. That can't be right. My father wouldn't agree to. Your father, Kohana interrupted, may not understand what he signed, but the men who wrote those words know exactly what they mean. They continued along the stream that flowed from the spring, following its path toward the boundary between Apache land and settler territory. Clara walked in silence, troubled by what she'd read. The treaty wasn't what she'd been told, not a fair exchange, but a thinly veiled appropriation. I heard them talking, she said finally, the memory surfacing from a council meeting she'd overheard while serving coffee. Hargrove said, once we control the water, we control the Indians. I didn't understand what he meant then. Kohana stopped walking. And now? Now I think. Clara hesitated, the implication difficult to voice. I think this treaty isn't about peace at all. No, Kohana agreed. It is about power. They reached a bend in the stream where the water pooled deeper. Here, Kohana pointed out stone carvings on a nearby rock face, concentric circles and flowing lines. My ancestors mapped the water sources centuries ago, he explained. They knew that in this land, those who understand water survive. Clara traced the ancient markings with her fingertips. We were taught the Indians had no writing. A flicker of amusement crossed Kohana's face. We have many things your people do not see. As they made their way back to camp, Clara found herself watching Kohana with new eyes. He moved through the landscape with an ease she envied, reading signs invisible to her, a disturbed patch of soil that indicated deer had passed recently, a particular bird call that signaled rain might come. Back at the camp's edge, Clara paused before returning to her dwelling. Why did you show me the treaty? If you know it's unfair, why not refuse it? Would refusal bring peace? Kohana asked. Or would it bring soldiers instead? Then why show me? Kohana studied her for a long moment. Because you are caught between worlds now, neither fully there nor here. Such a position offers perspective. That night, Clara carefully refolded the treaty document, troubled by what she had learned. A tentative trust had begun forming between her and Kohana, not romantic, but something perhaps more valuable, a shared understanding of deception at work around them. By the third night, Clara had grown accustomed to the rhythm of the Apache camp, the morning bustle, midday quiet, and evening gatherings around cooking fires. She still felt like an outsider, but the stares had become less hostile, more curious. After their evening meal, Kohana approached with a piece of stretched hide, marked with dotted patterns. Tonight, we look up, he said, gesturing toward the darkening sky. He led her to a small rise just beyond the camp's edge, where the view of the heavens was unobstructed. The desert night had fallen quickly, and stars were already emerging in brilliant clarity Clara had never witnessed in the settlement, where lantern light dimmed the sky. This, Kohana said, unrolling the hide chart, is how we navigate when there are no trails. Clara studied the intricate pattern of dots connected by lines. A star map? Kohana nodded, pointing upward to a bright star. The unchanging star. Your people call it the North Star. Polaris, Clara said, recognizing it from her father's occasional astronomy lessons. The shepherd's guide. For us, it is White Shell Woman's fire, Kohana replied. It never moves while all other stars circle around it. He traced a pattern on the chart, then guided her eyes to find the same formation in the sky, a cluster of stars shaped like a spread hand. The 5 fingers, he explained. When they point downward in early evening, the summer rains will soon end. Clara found herself relaxing as Kohana continued his lesson, pointing out constellations and explaining their significance in Apache culture. Many formations she recognized from her own knowledge, but with entirely different stories attached. That's Ursa Major, she said, pointing to a distinctive group of stars. The Great Bear. We call it the Dipper, Kohana said. The handle points to food when game is scarce. Clara smiled, the first genuine smile since her arrival. It seems we see the same stars but tell different stories about them. The stars do not care what stories we tell, Kohana observed. They shine regardless. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the vast desert night enveloping them. Clara found herself thinking how different this was from what she had expected. Not fear and degradation, but education and, surprisingly, respect. In the Bible, she said finally, God told Abraham to count the stars if he could, promising his descendants would be as numerous. Kohana considered this. A good story. Our legends say the stars are the campfires of those who have gone before us, watching over the living. I like that, Clara admitted. It's comforting to think of the dead still being present somehow. Something shifted in Kohana's expression, a brief vulnerability quickly masked. Clara remembered what she'd been told about him losing his family. Perhaps his interest in the stars was more personal than cultural. Have you, she began hesitantly, have you lost someone who watches from above? Kohana was silent for so long that Clara thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, he spoke, his voice quieter than before. My wife Nayeli and our son Noshi. He pointed to 3 stars in a small triangle. I show Noshi the brightest stars, so he will never lose his way home. The simple statement, heavy with grief, touched Clara deeply. Without thinking, she placed her hand briefly on Kohana's arm, a gesture of sympathy she would have offered anyone in her settlement who spoke of loss. He tensed momentarily, then relaxed, neither pulling away nor acknowledging the touch. From the edge of camp, Clara noticed several figures watching them, both Apache elders and the settler representatives who remained to observe the treaty's implementation. Their silhouettes looked stiff with disapproval. Kohana noticed too. They do not understand what they see, he said, rolling up the star chart. They expect different behavior. What do they expect? Clara asked, though she already knew. That I would claim what was offered, he replied matter-of-factly. That you would resist or submit, not this. Conversation between equals. Equals. The word lingered in Clara's mind as they walked back to camp, the star chart tucked securely under Kohana's arm. For the first time since leaving the settlement, she felt something unexpected, not just safety, but a glimmer of dignity restored. The 4th day dawned with commotion in the camp. Clara emerged from her dwelling to find several Apache warriors returning, one leading a limping pony. The animal's flank was matted with blood, its eyes wide with pain and fear. Kohana appeared at her side. A mountain lion, he explained. The hunters scared it away, but not before it clawed the young one. Clara approached cautiously. Back in the settlement, she had often helped tend injured livestock. The pony was smaller than the horses she knew, more compact and hardy-looking, with a distinctive dappled coat. May I? She asked, gesturing toward the wound. The warrior holding the pony's lead rope looked to Kohana, who nodded. Clara moved slowly, speaking in soothing tones as she examined the injury, 3 deep gashes across the hind quarter. It needs cleaning and stitching, she said. Do you have needle and thread, and herbs for infection? Kohana spoke rapidly in Apache to a nearby woman, who hurried away. He turned back to Clara. Nasha will bring what we have. You know healing? For animals, Clara clarified. My father kept horses, and we couldn't afford the veterinarian from town. Soon, Nasha returned with a small hide pouch. Clara opened it to find an assortment of dried plants, bone needles, and sinew thread. The materials were different from what she was used to, but the principles would be the same. We need to clean it first, she instructed, falling naturally into the role she'd played many times. And something to calm him. Kohana translated her words to the gathered Apache. To Clara's surprise, they listened attentively, several hurrying to fetch water and supplies. Nasha stepped forward with another pouch, indicating a dark powder inside. Sleeping medicine, Kohana explained. For pain. Together, they worked over the injured pony. Clara showed them how to flush the wounds thoroughly, while Kohana demonstrated how to apply the Apache healing powder. When it came time for stitching, Clara's fingers proved steadier than Kohana's, and he readily yielded the task to her. Your hands know this work, he observed as she made neat, careful stitches. Clara nodded, focused on her task. Animals don't judge who helps them. They only know kindness or cruelty. By midday, the pony's wounds were cleaned and stitched, a poultice of mixed settler and Apache medicine applied to prevent festering. The animal had been moved to a small corral, where it stood drowsily under a shade structure, occasionally nickering softly. Clara sat nearby, keeping watch. Kohana joined her, offering a water skin and dried meat. "You surprised them," he said, gesturing toward the Apache women who had assisted. They did not expect a white woman to know useful skills. "And what did you expect?" Clara asked, suddenly curious about his perception of her. Kohana considered this. "I expected fear, or perhaps arrogance, not competence." The candid assessment made Clara laugh despite herself. "I'm not sure that's a compliment." "It is truth," Kohana replied, the hint of a smile tugging at his mouth. "Which is better than flattery." They fell into comfortable silence, watching the pony shift its weight from one leg to another. The animal would recover, Clara was certain. "What will happen to it?" she asked. "He will belong to you," Kohana said matter-of-factly. "You saved his life. He is your responsibility now." Clara looked at him in surprise. "But I don't know how to ride properly." "Then you will learn," he replied simply. "Tomorrow's lesson." As the sun began its descent, Nasha approached them, carrying a small pouch, which she presented to Clara with a few soft words. "She thanks you," Kohana translated. "These are her healing herbs. She says you have good medicine hands." Clara accepted the gift with genuine gratitude, recognizing its significance. The pouch was beautifully crafted, decorated with intricate beadwork. "Tell her thank you," Clara said, "and that I would like to learn about Apache healing plants, if she's willing to teach me." When Kohana translated, Nasha's weathered face broke into a smile. She spoke rapidly, gesturing toward the surrounding landscape. "She says tomorrow, after riding lessons, she will show you what grows here that heals." Kohana relayed. "She says perhaps white eyes and Apache eyes together see more medicine than either alone." That night, Clara kept the herb pouch close, its unfamiliar scents reminding her that knowledge flowed in both directions and that respect could be earned through actions rather than words. On the 5th day, Clara rose early, eager to check on the pony. After confirming the animal was healing well, she sought out Nasha to learn about medicinal plants as promised. The older woman greeted her with a nod, gesturing for Clara to follow her to the edges of the camp. With Kohana away on scouting duties, another young Apache woman named Taluta joined them to translate. Through halting exchanges, Clara began learning the names and uses of desert plants, which leaves soothed burns, which roots eased stomach pains, which berries brought down fevers. By midday, Clara's apron pockets bulged with samples. When Taluta was called away to other duties, Clara decided to continue gathering alone, remembering a patch of promising herbs she'd spotted near the creek bend. The narrow path wound between rocky outcroppings. Clara hummed softly to herself, feeling more at ease than she had since arriving. The simple act of gathering herbs, something she'd done countless times back home, gave her a sense of normalcy. As she rounded a boulder, voices made her freeze. Male voices speaking English, coming from a small ravine just ahead. Clara recognized one immediately, Jason Hargrove, her father's business partner from the settlement. "Shipment arrives next week," Hargrove was saying. 30 rifles and ammunition, more than enough." "The Apache won't know what hit them," another voice replied. Thomas Wells, the settlement's deputy. Clara pressed herself against the rock, heart pounding. She hadn't known these men had remained behind after the ceremony. "What about the girl?" Wells asked. "She a problem?" "Nah," Hargrove replied dismissively. "She's just a bargaining chip. Once we secure the water rights and get the guns in place, she's served her purpose." "And if the Indian gets too attached?" Hargrove's laugh was cold. "Then he dies with the rest when they come for their water." Clara's blood ran cold. This wasn't about peace at all. It was about armed control of the water sources, and once the Apache were dependent on access points controlled by armed settlers. She must have made a sound, because the voices suddenly stopped. Footsteps crunched on gravel, coming closer. "Someone there," Wells called out. Clara slipped away as quietly as she could, heart hammering. She needed to find Kohana, but as she rounded another bend in the path, she nearly collided with Hargrove himself. "Well, look who it is," he said, grabbing her arm. "The little sacrificial lamb." Clara tried to pull away. "Let go of me." "What did you hear?" he demanded, his fingers digging painfully into her flesh. "Nothing," Clara lied. "I was just gathering herbs." Wells caught up to them, rifle in hand. "She heard us, Jason. Look at her face." Hargrove's expression hardened. "Take her back to camp. I'll deal with this." But before Wells could grab her, a sharp voice cut through the tension. "Release her." Kohana stood a few yards away, his rifle aimed steadily at Hargrove. Clara had never been so relieved to see anyone in her life. Hargrove's grip loosened. "Just having a friendly chat with our emissary," he said, false joviality failing to mask his anger. "The treaty does not permit armed settlers in our hunting grounds," Kohana said evenly. "Return to the designated area." For a tense moment, Clara thought Hargrove might refuse. Then he shrugged, stepping back with hands raised in mock surrender. "Just exploring, friend. No harm meant." "Go," Kohana ordered. The two settlers retreated, Hargrove casting a warning glance at Clara that made his message clear: stay silent. When they were out of earshot, Clara's composure crumbled. "They have guns hidden somewhere," she blurted out. 30 rifles coming next week. They're planning to control the water points and—" She faltered, the full implications hitting her. "And kill anyone who resists." Kohana's expression didn't change, but his eyes hardened. "Show me where you found them." Clara led him to the ravine. There, partially covered by canvas and brush, lay several wooden crates. Kohana pried one open to reveal rifles, newer and deadlier than the hunting weapons the Apache possessed. "This is just the beginning," Clara said shakily. "Hargrove said more are coming." Kohana closed the crate, his movements deliberate. "Did they see you discover this?" "No," Clara said, "but they know I overheard their plans." His eyes met hers, somber and assessing. "Then we are both in danger now." That evening, Clara sat cross-legged beside Kohana's fire, a small leather-bound journal open on her lap. After discovering the weapons, they'd agreed to keep their knowledge secret while gathering more information. Moving against Hargrove too soon might trigger the very violence they hoped to prevent. "Write everything you remember," Kohana had instructed, giving her the blank journal. "Every word they said, every detail you recall." Clara's pen moved steadily across the page, recording not just today's discovery but everything she'd observed since arriving, the treaty's hidden clauses, conversations overheard, Hargrove's unusual interest in the water access points. Kohana watched her write, occasionally adding another stick to the fire. The flames illuminated his face, highlighting the deep furrows of concern etching his brow. "In my settlement," Clara said, breaking the silence, "women aren't included in council meetings. We serve coffee while men make decisions, then leave before serious matters are discussed." She looked up from her writing. "Is it the same here?" Kohana shook his head. "Apache women have voice in council. They own the dwellings. They decide if a marriage continues or ends." Clara's pen paused. "They can end a marriage?" "If a husband is cruel or lazy, yes." A hint of amusement touched his eyes. "Men walk carefully knowing this." Clara considered this, thinking of women in her settlement, trapped in unhappy unions. "That seems wiser than our way." "Each people has wisdom and foolishness," Kohana replied. "The trick is knowing which is which." He reached for a pouch at his belt, extracting a pinch of something which he cast into the fire. The flames briefly turned blue-green, releasing a sweet, cedar-like aroma. "Prayer smoke," he explained, "to clear thoughts and invite wisdom." Clara closed her journal, watching the colored flames dance. "We pray with words, usually led by the Reverend. Personal prayers are silent, between oneself and God." "Silent prayers are good too," Kohana said, "but sometimes the ancestors need to smell your intentions." The concept was foreign to Clara's Protestant upbringing, yet somehow it resonated. How many times had she mouthed rote prayers while her heart remained disconnected? "What do your people believe happens after death?" she asked, curious despite herself. "The spirit travels 4 days to reach the next world," Kohana said. "There they join those who went before. Sometimes they choose to return in new forms." Clara nodded slowly. "The Bible speaks of heaven for the righteous and hell for sinners." But I've always wondered about children who die before learning right from wrong, or people who never heard God's word. Your God seems very concerned with judging, Kohana observed. Ours is more interested in balance. The simple statement made Clara consider her faith from an outside perspective for the first time. She'd been raised to see Christianity as the only truth, other beliefs as primitive superstitions. Yet Kohana's worldview held a coherence and depth she hadn't expected. The men planning violence, she said after a thoughtful pause, they call themselves Christians. They attend church every Sunday, yet they plot to kill for water and land. And some Apache would kill settlers given the chance, Kohana acknowledged. Belief and action do not always walk the same path. Clara reopened her journal, adding these reflections. The simple book had become more than a record of conspiracy. It was becoming a chronicle of her changing perspective. In the settlement, she said, I was taught that Apache are savages who worship false gods and steal children. And I was taught that white settlers are greedy liars who break every promise, Kohana replied evenly. Perhaps we were both taught convenient untruths. Clara looked up at him, really seeing the man across the fire, not as the Indian she'd been raised to fear, nor as the reluctant bridegroom she'd been sent to, but as a person of principle navigating the same troubled waters she was. Kohana, she asked quietly, if we prevent this violence, what happens after the 12 nights end? He met her gaze steadily. That will be your choice, Clara Finch, as it should have been from the beginning. The journal in her lap felt suddenly precious, a tangible record of transformation, of seeing beyond the boundaries of the world she'd known. Dawn broke on the 6th day with the arrival of a rider, dust-covered and weary, his pony lathered from hard travel. Clara watched from her dwelling as the man spoke urgently with the tribal elders, Kohana translating. The conversation looked tense, with much gesturing toward the eastern mountains. Later, as Clara tended to her healing pony, Kohana approached, holding a small leather message pouch marked with symbols she didn't recognize. We have learned something important, he said, his expression grave. A scout from the Mescalero band brings warning. Mescalero? Clara asked. Another Apache tribe? Kohana nodded. Cousins to our people. They camp near the eastern water source, the one your settlement wants most. He untied the message pouch, removing a piece of bark with markings scratched into its surface. The Mescalero have noticed white men surveying their territory, men with measuring tools and papers. Clara's stomach tightened. Surveyors. They're mapping the land before claiming it. Yes, but there is more. Kohana pointed to specific marks on the bark. They report strangers speaking of clearing out the vermin once the treaty is signed. The cruel words hung in the air between them. Clara thought of the rifles she'd discovered, of Hargrove's cold laugh when discussing Apache deaths. The pieces were fitting together into a horrifying picture. The treaty with your band isn't about peace, she said slowly. It's about isolating the Mescalero. Once your people are bound by agreement not to interfere. The settlers will attack our cousins, Kohana finished. Take their water, their land, and we will be unable to help without breaking our word. Clara thought back to settlement council meetings, fragments of overheard conversation suddenly making terrible sense. I heard Reverend Holcomb tell my father that securing the eastern watershed would solve 2 problems at once, she recalled. I thought he meant drought and conflict. But he meant gaining water and eliminating the Mescalero. Kohana carefully returned the bark message to its pouch. Our bands have had disagreements in the past. Some here might say the Mescalero's fate is not our concern. But you don't believe that, Clara observed. No. His eyes met hers. And neither do you. Clara paced, thinking rapidly. How much time do we have? The message says surveyors plan to finish their work before the next full moon. That gives us 7 days. The treaty becomes final on the 13th day, Clara noted, the day after the vigil ends. Yes, when the settlement believes I have claimed you as wife, securing their end of the bargain. Clara felt a chill despite the morning heat. They never expected you to invoke the vigil. It's bought us time they didn't plan for. Kohana nodded slowly. The question is how to use that time. Clara considered what she knew of settlement politics. We need evidence, something beyond our word. The tribal council won't act against the treaty based just on suspicion, will they? No, and many would not act to help the Mescalero regardless. Kohana's expression grew distant. There is history between our bands. What kind of history? Kohana hesitated, then spoke carefully. 3 seasons ago, during the worst drought, a party of young Mescalero warriors raided our camp for horses. My wife and son were killed in the fighting. Clara's breath caught. Now she understood the deeper currents of his grief, not just loss, but the complicated anger of losing loved ones to those he should consider kin. I'm so sorry, she said softly. That makes this even more difficult for you. Blood calls for blood, Kohana acknowledged. That is our way. But innocent Mescalero women and children did not kill my family, and settler guns will not distinguish between guilty and innocent. His ability to see beyond personal vengeance moved Clara deeply. How many in her settlement could do the same? We need to find those additional weapons, she said decisively, and we need to warn the Mescalero band directly. Kohana studied her with new respect. Both are dangerous. The settlers watch you. If they suspect you've turned against them. I was never with them, Clara replied, a quiet certainty in her voice. Not in this, not in using me as a distraction while they plan murder. For the first time, Kohana placed his hand briefly on her shoulder, a gesture of solidarity that felt more significant than any words. Then we begin tomorrow, he said. I will teach you to ride properly. We may need to move quickly when the time comes. The 7th day dawned with Clara already awake, anticipation and nervousness keeping sleep at bay. Today she would learn to ride properly, not side-saddle as settlement ladies did for propriety, but astride as necessity demanded. Kohana waited by the corral with 2 ponies, her healing one, now recovered enough for light work, and his own sturdy mount. Here, he said, handing her a set of leather reins decorated with simple beadwork. These are yours now. A rider's first responsibility is control. Clara examined the craftsmanship, running her fingers over the smooth leather. Unlike the ornate bridles used in the settlement, these were practical, designed for communication between rider and horse rather than display. The pony responds to pressure, not pain, Kohana explained, demonstrating how to hold the reins properly. Light hands, strong seat. What followed was the most physically demanding day Clara had experienced. Mounting without a proper saddle required strength she didn't know she possessed. Staying balanced while the pony walked required muscles she'd never used. And controlling direction through subtle shifts of weight rather than yanking on the reins went against everything she'd observed of settler riding. After her 3rd tumble into the dust, Clara sat breathing heavily, frustration evident in her flushed face. I can't do this, she said, embarrassment making her voice sharp. It's impossible. Kohana dismounted in one fluid motion, squatting beside her. Impossible or just difficult? Clara brushed dirt from her skirts. I've seen how your women ride. They make it look effortless. They began as children, he reminded her. You begin as a woman. The path is harder, but your determination is stronger. The simple vote of confidence steadied her. Clara got to her feet, approaching her patient pony once more. Show me again, she requested. By midday, Clara could mount and dismount without assistance and maintain her seat at a walk. By afternoon, she had progressed to a trot, though each bounce jarred her spine and threatened her balance. The rhythm, Kohana kept reminding her. Feel the rhythm and move with it, not against it. Gradually, Clara began to understand. Instead of fighting the pony's motion, she surrendered to it, finding harmony rather than dominance. When she finally managed to circle the corral without gripping desperately with her knees, Kohana nodded in approval. Good, tomorrow we try the open trail. Tomorrow? Clara's eyes widened. I'm not ready for that. Ready or not, time presses, Kohana replied. The weapons shipment comes in 4 days. The treaty finalizes in 6. The reminder of their urgency sobered Clara. Her sore muscles and bruised pride seemed trivial compared to the lives at stake. As they led the ponies back to water, Clara noticed Hargrove watching from the edge of camp, his gaze calculating. He'd been keeping his distance since their confrontation, but his presence remained a constant threat. He suspects something, she murmured to Kohana. Yes, but he will not act without proof. Kohana's voice was steady. We must be the same, careful, until we have evidence no one can ignore. That evening, Clara sat outside her dwelling, applying salve to her chafed thighs and thinking about the day's lessons. Beyond the physical skills, she had learned something more valuable, the difference between the Apache approach to horses and the settler way. Settlers broke horses, dominating their spirit. Apache partnered with them, respecting their nature while directing their energy. The contrast reminded her of the difference between the treaty's approach to peace and what true harmony might look like. Nasha approached, offering a cup of tea that smelled of desert herbs. The older woman had taken to checking on Clara each evening, their communication limited to gestures and the few Apache words Clara had learned. Ah-hee-hee, Clara thanked her, using one such word. Nasha smiled, then pointed to the leather reins Clara had carefully placed beside her bedding, making a motion of approval. Independence, Kohana translated, appearing silently as he often did. She says the reins represent your growing independence. Clara looked at the simple leather straps with new appreciation. In the settlement, women were like horses in side saddles, constrained by artificial limitations, directed rather than directing. Here, despite being an outsider, she was being given tools of self-determination. Tomorrow, she said with newfound resolve, I want to try cantering. Kohana's rare smile flashed briefly. Then we begin at dawn. On the 8th day, Clara rode alongside Kohana through the scrubland, her confidence growing with each mile. Her skirts had been modified, split and sewn by Nasha into something resembling loose trousers, while maintaining modest appearance. The adaptation allowed her to ride astride properly, another small step away from settlement constraints. They were returning from scouting the trail to the Mescalero territory when Clara spotted a familiar figure approaching the camp, Mrs. Holcomb, the Reverend's wife, accompanied by a settlement guard. Clara's stomach tightened. Of all people from her former life, Rebecca Holcomb was perhaps the most formidable, the settlement's moral authority in a starched collar. Keep riding, Kohana suggested, noting Clara's distress. No, Clara decided. I should speak with her. She might have information we need. Mrs. Holcomb was waiting when they returned, her pinched expression conveying disapproval of everything from Clara's modified clothing to her easy manner with Kohana. Mrs. Holcomb, Clara greeted her, dismounting with newfound grace. This is unexpected. Clara Finch, the older woman replied stiffly. I've come to check on your situation, and to bring you this. She thrust forward a small package wrapped in calico. Clara accepted it, unwrapping the cloth to find her mother's silver cross necklace, the one she'd left behind, thinking jewelry inappropriate for her new circumstances. Your father thought you might want this reminder of your faith, Mrs. Holcomb said pointedly, eyeing the Apache camp. In case it's being tested. Clara fingered the familiar pendant. My faith is fine, thank you. Mrs. Holcomb lowered her voice, though her condemning tone remained. The settlement is talking, Clara, about how you're riding about like a savage, living among heathens without proper ceremony. Have you forgotten everything you were taught? Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks, not from shame but unexpected anger. I've learned more in 8 days here than in years of your husband's sermons, Mrs. Holcomb. The older woman's eyes widened at the insubordination. I see the influence already. Come back with me today. Your father never intended this arrangement to proceed in this fashion. What fashion did he intend? Clara asked quietly. That I be handed over without choice or voice, that I smile while men plot violence behind false treaties. Mrs. Holcomb's expression shifted from disapproval to calculation. So you've heard things. Idle talk, nothing more. I've seen the hidden rifles, Clara said flatly. I know about the plans for the Mescalero band. The color drained from Mrs. Holcomb's face. You don't understand the complexities. I understand murder, Clara interrupted. Dressed up as progress or manifest destiny or whatever justification helps you sleep at night. Mrs. Holcomb grabbed Clara's arm, fingers digging in painfully. You foolish girl, you were raised better than this. Think of your immortal soul. Clara pulled free. I am, more clearly than ever. If you don't return with me now, you'll no longer be welcome in the settlement, Mrs. Holcomb warned. Your father will disown you. You'll be dead to us. The words should have devastated Clara. Instead, they clarified something she'd been feeling since discovering the hidden weapons. She no longer belonged to that world of convenient lies and moral compromises. Then I'll be dead to you, she said steadily. Mrs. Holcomb's face hardened. The savage has bewitched you. No proper Christian girl would choose this life. Perhaps I'm not proper anymore, Clara replied. But I think I might be honest for the first time. After the settlement delegation departed, Clara sat alone by the creek, turning the silver cross over in her hands. The symbol had once represented everything certain in her life: salvation, community, identity. Now it felt like a relic from someone else's story. She was still there at sunset when Kohana found her. Without speaking, he sat nearby, giving her space to wrestle with her thoughts. I can never go back, she finally said, opening her palm to reveal the cross. But I don't know if I belong here either. Few people truly belong anywhere, Kohana observed. Most of us stand between worlds. Clara closed her fingers around the cross. Mrs. Holcomb said I've forgotten my faith. But I think perhaps I'm finding it. Just not the version they taught me. Kohana nodded slowly. The path between old beliefs and new understanding is never straight. Clara made her decision then, slipping the chain around her neck, tucking the cross beneath her modified clothing. She would keep this part of herself, this link to her past, even as she moved forward into uncertainty. Tomorrow, she said, rising to her feet, we need to find those additional weapons. Night had fallen on the 9th day when Kohana led Clara to a secluded clearing where 3 elders waited, Mach, whom she recognized from the ceremony, and 2 others introduced as Daxi and Nantai. The atmosphere was tense, the only light coming from a small shielded fire. Between them lay a ceremonial wampum belt, a wide band of woven shells and beads that Clara had learned represented tribal authority. Its presence signified that this was no ordinary meeting, but one where binding decisions might be made. We must speak carefully, Mach began, Kohana translating his words. What you claim threatens the peace we have worked for. Clara nodded, understanding the gravity of their accusations. From her journal, she read aloud every detail she had recorded, the hidden clauses in the treaty, conversations overheard, the weapons cache, and Mrs. Holcomb's telling reaction to being confronted. When she finished, Daxi, the oldest of the elders, spoke skeptically. The white girl may lie to protect her people, or to create chaos. Kohana translated, then responded firmly in Apache. Clara caught the word for honor among his rapid speech. He vouches for your truthfulness, Nantai explained in surprisingly good English, but we need more than words. Clara reached into her pocket, producing a folded paper, a page she had carefully removed from the treaty document during her examination days earlier. This is the hidden clause, she explained, spreading it before them. It speaks of security measures, but makes no mention of rifles or attacks. The deception is in what isn't written as much as what is. The elders studied the document, Nantai translating for the others. Their expressions remained impassive, but Clara sensed their growing concern. We have seen the first cache of weapons, Kohana added. But Clara overheard mention of a larger shipment arriving before the treaty is finalized. Why would they attack the Mescalero and not us? Mach asked through Kohana. Strategy, Clara answered. Your band has made agreements with the army before. Attacking you would bring military investigation. The Mescalero are more isolated, with fewer allies among white authorities. And once the Mescalero are gone, Daxi pressed. Clara met the old man's gaze steadily. Then you would be next, one band at a time, dividing to conquer. Silence fell as the elders absorbed this. Clara knew they were weighing not just her words, but generations of broken promises and violence from settlers. The weapons must be found, Nantai finally said. Without them we have only suspicions. The shipment arrives tomorrow, Kohana said. We believe it will come through Spencer's Canyon, where the wagon road from town passes close to settlement land. Mach fingered the wampum belt thoughtfully. If we move against the settlers without proof, we break the treaty first. The army would have cause to eliminate us all. We need only observe, Kohana argued. Then bring evidence to those who would oppose such treachery. And who would that be? Daxi asked bitterly. What white man would take our word over their own kind? Colonel Harrison at Fort Bowie, Clara suggested. He's known to be fair-minded, and the Indian agent, Mr. Collins. Both would investigate if presented with real evidence. The elders conferred among themselves in low voices. Clara could sense their reluctance. Decades of betrayal had taught them to expect the worst from settler authorities. Finally, Muck placed his hand on the wampum belt. We will allow you and 3 warriors to track this shipment, but you must obtain proof that cannot be denied, and if you fail— He left the consequence unspoken, but Clara understood. If they failed, the tribe would have no choice but to prepare for war, a war they would likely lose. As they left the meeting, Kohana's expression was more troubled than Clara had ever seen it. "What's wrong?" she asked. "They agreed to help." "They did not tell you everything," he replied quietly. "If we are discovered, the settlement will claim you have been corrupted or coerced. They will use it as pretext for breaking the treaty." Clara absorbed this. "You mean I'm putting your people at greater risk by helping?" "Yes." "Then I should go alone," she decided immediately. Kohana shook his head. "Neither of us succeeds alone in this. We go together or not at all." The simple declaration, "we," carried weight that Clara felt in her chest. Whatever happened tomorrow, they had crossed a threshold. No longer captor and captive, no longer even reluctant allies, but partners in a dangerous truth. "Dawn, then," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "We leave at dawn." The 10th night of the vigil fell silent and cool, with clouds obscuring the stars. Clara sat beside her small fire, checking the provisions she'd packed for tomorrow's journey: water skin, dried meat, her journal, and a small knife Nasha had given her for protection. Her hands moved mechanically while her mind raced with all that might go wrong. A soft footfall announced Kohana's arrival. He carried something wrapped in soft hide, his expression solemn in the firelight. "The others are ready," he said, settling across from her. "We leave before first light." Clara nodded, unable to quiet her thoughts. What if we're too late? Or what if we're caught? The settlement council would never believe me over Hargrove. "Then we ensure our evidence cannot be denied," Kohana replied with calm certainty. He unwrapped the hide package, revealing a simple ceramic cup decorated with geometric patterns. From a small pouch at his waist, he produced a mixture of dried herbs and berries, which he carefully placed in the cup before adding water from a small flask. "What is this?" Clara asked, watching as he set the cup near the fire's edge to warm. "Husker," he answered. "A drink for those facing challenge. It clears the mind and strengthens resolve." As the liquid heated, a spicy sweet aroma rose from the cup. Kohana lifted it carefully, offering it first to the 4 directions before taking a small sip. He then extended it to Clara. "We share this as equals," he said, bound by common purpose. Clara accepted the cup, their fingers briefly touching in the exchange. The warmth from both the ceramic and the brief contact spread through her hands. She sipped cautiously, finding the taste bitter at first, then surprisingly pleasant, like cinnamon and sage, with hints of something she couldn't identify. They passed the cup between them 3 times, completing a ritual Clara didn't fully understand, but somehow felt appropriate to the moment. When the last drop was gone, Kohana placed the empty cup between them, a symbol of their shared commitment. "Tomorrow changes everything," Clara said quietly. "For both of us." "Yes." "If we succeed," she continued, voicing the question that had troubled her for days. "What happens when the vigil ends? The treaty will be exposed as fraudulent. The agreement for me to stay here would have no standing." Kohana studied her face in the firelight. "You wish to return to your people?" "They're not my people anymore," Clara admitted. "Not after what I've learned, but I don't know if I belong here either." "Belonging is not always about place," Kohana said thoughtfully. "Sometimes it is about purpose." Clara toyed with the cross at her neck, which now hung openly rather than hidden. In the settlement, everything was certain. My place, my future, my beliefs. Here, everything is shifting. "Like sand dunes in the desert," Kohana agreed, "always changing yet always themselves." The poetic observation surprised Clara, revealing yet another layer to this man she'd been offered to like property. In 10 days, she'd seen him as captor, teacher, ally, and now, something unnamed that made her heart beat faster when their eyes met. "When you invoked the vigil," she asked, "did you ever think it would lead to this?" "No," he admitted. "I sought only to honor our traditions, to give you choice where others would deny it." "And now?" Kohana's gaze held hers steadily. "Now I am grateful for these days, whatever comes." The simple statement carried weight beyond its words. Clara felt something shift between them, an acknowledgement of connection transcending their circumstances. Without speaking, Kohana reached for the cup again, this time turning it upside down and placing it on the ground between them. He then placed his hand palm down beside it. After a moment's hesitation, Clara understood and placed her smaller hand beside his, not quite touching but close enough to feel the warmth radiating between them. "In my people's way," he explained softly, "this signifies commitment to a shared path, whatever storms may come." Clara's throat tightened with emotion. This was no formal marriage, no ownership or submission, but something far more profound, a choice freely made by two equals. "Whatever storms may come," she repeated, the words feeling like a vow. As the fire burned low, neither moved their hand away, content to exist in this moment of connection before dawn would thrust them into danger. Dawn found Clara and Kohana concealed among the rocks overlooking Spencer's Canyon, where the trade road narrowed between steep walls. 3 Apache warriors, Tarak, Nalnish, and Bidziel, were positioned at strategic points, nearly invisible against the landscape. The morning air carried the scent of dust and sage, with storm clouds gathering on the distant horizon. "There," Kohana whispered, pointing to movement on the road below. A heavily laden wagon approached, flanked by 4 armed riders. Clara recognized Hargrove immediately, his distinctive hat visible even from their elevated position. Beside him rode Reverend Holcomb, whose presence confirmed their worst suspicions. The conspiracy reached the highest levels of settlement leadership. "We need to see inside that wagon," Clara murmured. Kohana signaled to the warriors. Nalish mounted his pony and disappeared down a hidden trail, executing their carefully planned diversion. Minutes later, a startled deer burst from the brush directly in front of the wagon, causing the horses to rear in alarm. As the drivers struggled to control the team, Hargrove and 2 riders pursued the animal around a bend in the canyon. It was the moment they'd been waiting for. Kohana and Clara descended swiftly, approaching the wagon from the blind side, while Reverend Holcomb and the remaining guard were distracted. Pulling back the canvas cover, they found exactly what they feared: crates of new Winchester rifles, ammunition, and explosives, far more firepower than any hunting expedition would require. Clara quickly scribbled in her journal, documenting the exact contents, while Kohana extracted a rifle and ammunition box as evidence. They had just secured these items when a shout rang out. They'd been spotted. "Run!" Kohana ordered, pushing Clara toward the rocks as a shot cracked past them. They scrambled for cover as more shots followed. Ahead, Tarak waited with their ponies. Clara mounted swiftly, her days of practice paying off as they fled up a narrow trail too small for the pursuing wagon. "We have what we need," she called to Kohana as they rode. "Now we must reach Fort Bowie before they do." But when they crested the ridge, disaster awaited. A line of settlement men blocked their path, rifles raised. Hargrove had anticipated their route and set a trap. Clara's heart sank as they were forced to rein in their ponies. "Well, well," Hargrove drawled, stepping forward. "The Indian and his white squaw caught red-handed stealing settlement property. The only theft here is your plot against the mescalero," Clara retorted, her voice steady despite her fear. Hargrove's eyes narrowed. "You've forgotten your place, Clara Finch. Your father will be ashamed when he learns how thoroughly you've betrayed your own kind." "My kind?" Clara's voice rose. "My kind doesn't murder for water rights." Reverend Holcomb joined them, his face flushed with exertion and righteous anger. "This is God's land, meant for God's people to cultivate. The heathens have had their chance." "There's nothing godly about what you're planning," Clara replied, fingering her cross necklace. "Nothing Christ would recognize as faith." As the confrontation unfolded, Clara became aware of movement in the brush around them. The three Apache warriors had not abandoned them, but were positioning themselves strategically. Kohana must have noticed too, for he subtly shifted his pony, creating space between them and the settlers. Then, unexpectedly, Betrayal emerged from cover, not attacking but carrying a long pole topped with white cloth. A peace flag. The settlers hesitated, confused by this development. Kohana seized the moment. "We do not seek violence," he announced clearly. "We seek justice. The weapons you hide are meant for killing Mescalero women and children, not for settlement defense." "Preposterous," Reverend Holcomb blustered. "These arms are for protection against savage raids." "Then you won't mind if Colonel Harrison at Fort Bowie examines them," Clara countered, holding up her journal. "I've documented everything. The hidden treaty clauses, the secret meetings, today's shipment. Even if you silence us, this evidence will reach him." It was a bluff. The journal would be lost if they were killed. But the confidence in her voice created doubt among the settlers. Several exchanged uneasy glances. Clearly not all were privy to the full plan. "These men may follow you out of fear or ignorance," Kohana said to Hargrove. "But do they know they would hang for murder if your scheme is discovered?" The words struck home. A young settler lowered his rifle slightly. "Mr. Hargrove, you said this was about securing water rights legal-like." "It is," Hargrove snapped, but his authority was visibly wavering. In that moment of uncertainty, Clara made her boldest move. She urged her pony forward, stopping between the two groups with the white flag now in her hand. "Tomorrow," she announced, "we bring all parties together. Settlement Council, Apache elders, Mescalero representatives, and Fort Bowie authorities. The truth will be heard by everyone, not hidden in secret agreements." The 11th day broke with tension thick enough to cut with a knife. The Apache camp had transformed into neutral ground, with representatives from all concerned parties gathered under a central canopy. Colonel Harrison from Fort Bowie sat with ramrod posture, his blue uniform a stark contrast to the earthen tones around him. Beside him, Indian Agent Collins scribbled notes furiously. The Mescalero delegation, 3 wary men who had arrived under military escort, kept to themselves, their expressions guarded. The Settlement Council occupied one side of the space, notably missing Hargrove and Reverend Holcomb, who were under military custody after the evidence had been presented. Clara's father sat among them, his face a mask of conflicting emotions whenever he looked at his daughter. At the center of this tense gathering lay a new document, a revised treaty with simple, straightforward language that Clara had helped draft through the night. Its pages represented hours of difficult negotiation, with Kohana and Clara serving as bridges between worlds that had forgotten how to communicate without deception. "The terms are clear," Colonel Harrison stated, addressing the gathering. "Equal water access for all parties, with military oversight of key watersheds to prevent interference. No settlement expansion into designated Apache territories for 5 years, renewable upon review." Clara watched the faces around her as Harrison continued outlining the agreement. Some settlement men looked resentful, their dreams of easy expansion checked. Others seemed relieved that a potential bloodbath had been averted. The Apache elders remained impassive, having learned through bitter experience that white men's papers held only the value of the honor behind them. When the colonel finished, an uncomfortable silence fell. Who would be first to commit to this new path? To Clara's surprise, it was her father who stood. "My daughter," he began, voice rough with emotion, "showed more courage in 10 days than I've shown in a lifetime. I was willing to sacrifice her for water rights. She was willing to risk her life for honest peace." He faced the Apache delegation directly. "I cannot undo the wrongs of the past, but I can begin a better future. I signed this treaty with a true heart." One by one, representatives from each group approached the document, making their marks. The Mescalero chief spoke through an interpreter, his words measured and dignified. "We come as reluctant allies but leave as cautious friends," he said. "Water flows for all or none. This is the desert's law, which is stronger than man's." As the formalities concluded, Clara stood slightly apart, aware of her unique position. No longer fully of the settlement, not truly of the Apache but somehow integral to both. Kohana joined her, his presence a steadying force. "Your father wishes to speak with you," he said quietly. Clara nodded, watching as her father approached hesitantly, his hat clutched in weathered hands. "Clara," he began awkwardly, "I don't expect forgiveness." "You have it anyway," she interrupted gently. "You were doing what you thought necessary to survive." His eyes filled with tears. "Your mother would be proud of the woman you've become, stronger than I ever was." He glanced at Kohana, then back to his daughter. "Will you return to the settlement?" The question hung between them, the future distilled into simple words. "My place is here now," Clara said, the certainty in her voice surprising even herself. "But not as was originally intended. I'll be teaching at the meeting point between our communities. Colonel Harrison has approved a position for me as a cultural liaison." Her father absorbed this, nodding slowly. "You'll visit sometimes?" "Of course," she promised. "The distance between us will be measured in miles, not in hearts." As the gathering dispersed, Clara noticed several Apache women approaching settler wives, tentatively exchanging words about children, garden plants, and cooking methods, simple, domestic conversations that nonetheless represented profound change. Where treaties might falter, human connection could bridge divides. Machk approached Kohana and Clara, the ceremonial wampum belt in his hands. With formal dignity, he draped it temporarily over both their wrists, a gesture of official recognition. "Tomorrow is the final day of the vigil," the elder said. "The choice that was promised must still be made." His eyes, wise with years, moved from Clara to Kohana. "Though perhaps it has been made already in actions rather than words." After Mach departed, Clara and Kohana stood together, the wampum belt between them symbolizing not ownership or obligation, but partnership freely chosen. "Tomorrow," Kohana said softly, "the sun rises on the 13th day." Clara nodded, feeling the weight of ending and beginning in those words. "And a different world than the one we expected." The 13th dawn arrived with gentle light that turned the desert gold. Clara woke early, her heart both peaceful and expectant. Today marked the end of the 12-night moon vigil, the day she had been promised choice. She dressed with care in clothing Nasha had helped her create, a practical blend of settler and Apache designs that reflected her new position between worlds. Around her neck, her mother's silver cross hung alongside a small turquoise stone Kohana had given her after their shared cup ceremony. Outside, the camp stirred with purposeful activity. Word had spread about the ceremony to come, and both Apache and a small contingent from the settlement had gathered to witness this unprecedented conclusion to what had begun as a human transaction. Clara found Kohana by the stream where they had first observed the water levels together 12 days ago. He stood tall and dignified, dressed in his finest attire, his hair freshly braided with silver ornaments catching the morning light. "The water flows stronger today," he observed as she approached, indicating the stream that had been a trickle when she arrived. Clara nodded. "The storm 2 nights ago brought blessing." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the strengthened current. So much had changed in 12 days, not just between them, but within each of them. Clara barely recognized the frightened, resigned girl who had arrived, clutching her mother's Bible. Kohana had transformed too, the grief that had isolated him now balanced with renewed purpose. "Today you make your choice," he said finally, turning to face her, as was promised. Clara met his gaze steadily. "I made my choice days ago, when I decided to fight alongside you rather than return to the settlement." "That was a choice of action," Kohana replied. "Today is a choice of heart." From a small pouch, he produced 2 objects that caught the morning light. Rings, one crafted from silver in the settler tradition, the other from polished wood and shell beads in Apache style. "I offer not ownership," he said carefully, "but partnership, not obligation, but choice renewed each day." His dark eyes held hers. "If you wish to walk your path alone, I will honor that. If you wish to walk beside me, I would be honored to walk beside you." Clara's throat tightened with emotion. This was worlds away from the arrangement that had brought her here, a man asking rather than claiming, offering rather than taking. "When I came here," she said softly, I thought I was being sacrificed. Instead, I found myself. She took the rings from his palm, studying their contrasting materials. These are beautiful. Did you make them? Kohana nodded. The silver with help from your father, who gave his blessing yesterday. The wood and shell with guidance from Mach, who says our union would be recognized by both peoples. The mention of her father's involvement surprised and moved Clara. It represented healing beyond what she had thought possible just days ago. Their private moment was interrupted by the approach of tribal elders and settlement representatives. The time had come for the formal ceremony. But before they turned to join the gathering, Clara placed both rings in Kohana's palm, closing his fingers gently around them. I choose this path, she said, her voice clear and certain. I choose partnership between equals. I choose you, Kohana Black Sky, not because I was offered to you, but because I offer myself freely. The ceremony that followed blended elements from both traditions. Clara's father stood witness for the settlement, his weathered face solemn but proud as he placed her hand in Kohana's. Much spoke ancient words of blessing, while Nasha draped a ceremonial blanket, the same one from Clara's arrival, now richly significant, around both their shoulders. When the rings were exchanged, Clara felt the weight of multiple worlds converging, her past in the settlement, her present with the Apache, and a future that would help bridge both. As tradition dictated, the newly joined couple walked together to the stream, where they each took a drink of the life-giving water and then offered it to the other, symbol of mutual sustenance and care. Standing beside the strengthened current, Clara thought of how she had arrived, as property to be exchanged for water rights. Now she stood as an equal partner in creating genuine peace, the water flowing freely for all. What happens now? Someone from the settlement asked as the ceremony concluded. Clara looked to Kohana, then to the gathered communities, her voice steady with newfound authority. Now we begin, she said simply, together.